not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psychology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Jobber on the 10th of November 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Now we have digested the many elections across these 50 continuous states. Tomorrow night on The Week That Was, we'll wrap up some of the results here. But tonight we'll talk about Virginia, from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, the epicenter of the beginning of the end of many Republicans in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The heavy higher effect was in, and if you recall, she was a woman brutally murdered by an alt-right supporter and a supporter of the Republican Party. The Republican Party called on a party hack named Gillespie, who had run before, and he'd also run the Republican National Committee. Old Gillespie just could not get it done. Many of the polls showed a fairly tight race in the margin of error. We went over that. There were some polls that did not use registered voters, a list, as they call them, that stood out. The historic Hampton University did not, and also Quinnipiac. Now, what happened there was, in the early going back in October, the Hampton University issued a poll, had an 8-point lead for Gillespie. Now, we looked at that as many people did. Some people thought it was an outlier, but at the same time, it perhaps showed a surge by Gillespie, his last surge, and of course any indication of Gillespie started to go downhill, and they fell into the margin of error. And after that, a few polls showed him ahead by 1 or 2 points, but always in the margin of error. Whereas Nathan was consistently ahead by anywhere from 2 to 5 points, a little beyond the margin of error. But the Quinnipiac poll put him ahead effectively by 8.5 to 9. I don't have the precise poll up here. But that was pretty much on center of what actually happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Nathan from the shore of Virginia, that is not in the Washington, D.C. beltway of suburbs and extraburbs. It's the eastern shore. That area is more of southern than the rest of Virginia. We had his victory speech on there, but not only did he deliver, but progressives across the state running as Democrats delivered, and effectively, we'll go to the Larry Sabato's report, Dr. Sabato, in just a second here, their House of Delegates. It is virtually tied, and I believe it's at 50-50. But anyway, let's go to that. And after we finish with our friends at the University of Virginia, we'll go to Joe Scarborough and several others that make analysis here where the Republican Party is, where Mr. Bannon and company have taken it. But one of the things to remember about Bannon inherited a party from Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan was a strategist for Richard Milhouse Nixon, and they ran the infamous, if you get Kevin Phillips' book, The Southern Strategy, that was what they ran, and that, excuse me, has been their cookie-cutter pattern. And in 1980, the election of Ronald Wilson Reagan. Now, a little different there in that they were able to use the same racism, affirmative action, busing, crime. Those are the things they were able to highlight. And also there was America Held Hostage. ABC had it out there. So the monopoly networks, just as in 2016, helped the Republican candidate. Now you'll hear much follow about the Russian factor. V.I. Putin said today that the U.S. was interfering in the Russian elections next year. Well, part of this is that the U.S., particularly under Hillary Monster Clinton, when she was Minister of State, openly set up foundations, etc., in NGOs in Moscow and around the Russian Federation to influence the election, and also these various groups, as V.I. Putin calls them, of various colors, and that extended into the Ukraine, where people went out in various colors. They had the Orange Revolution, they didn't have a blue one, but in several others. But when the Ukraine, what happened was they utilized the ultra-right, fascists, and these were the kinds of people that took over. Now, of course, V.I. Putin and his party moved center-right, as some people like to say here, alt-right, and set up a nationalist-type agenda, which was unfortunate. It's not going to work. It has never worked. And then we go to the 2015-2016 primaries and elections. Steve Bannon, who is running a modern-day fascist site named Alt-Right, was a principal advisor to D.J. Trump. In fact, he was a principal advisor at the White House, but the curtain, as they say, shut on Bannon. Bannon decided that he was going to blow things up. He got various candidates. He did not get Roy Moore, who is now at the crosshairs himself, and Judge Moore has come in onto this new wave. We did a show last night, I invite you to listen to it, called The Bill Cosby Factor. Well, Judge Moore is one of the latest victims of the Bill Cosby Factor. They went back when he was in his 30s. That would have been in the late, the late 80s, I suppose, with some young lady that was a teenager at the time. And immediately comes out, defense of him by various Bible thumpers out of Wheaton, a college or whatever it is. I believe that's where Reagan went to. No, he went to Eureka. Anyway, in Illinois, they have something called the Billy Graham whatever there. And this person was talking about biblical type of stuff, going back to, quote-unquote, the parents of the Jesus, Joseph and the Mary, that were probably teenagers at the time. No doubt about that. I mean, from a historical standpoint, people became married, and in many of the southern states, under either common law or the law, I recall Jerry Lewis married his cousin. She was 13. And so, in other words, that would not be unusual there. And evidently the punishment for the type of relationship that Judge Moore was purported to have had was a maximum of 1 year. So in other words, it is nothing. So what will happen with Judge Moore? Well, the biblical people, the evangelicals, as according to them, if old Justice Moore had been a quote-unquote sinful person, he can be forgiven. And as Jesse Jackson said, well, how many times can a person be forgiven? 1,000 times 1,000. So in other words, Judge Moore is going to skate on the ice just like he's in the middle of Lake Placid, New York. On this one, unless, as they say, a platoon of women come out. But part of the problem is this. Judge Moore has been a controversial person. He's fought the powers to be in Alabama and in the U.S., so nothing is new there. He sent out a fundraiser today. Some say basically because of some of the Republicans that had endorsed him could withdraw their endorsement and he can get the money first. But anyway, that is politically prudent. There's no doubt about that. But how this storm will come over, no doubt some Republicans will decide they will not vote for him and vote for Doug Moore, the Democrat. But how many is very hard to say. That race, haven't seen any polling lately, was becoming a tighter race, a 5-point race. I forget what the margin of error was. So Doug Jones would be in better shape. They're talking, well, maybe we can do a write-in campaign. They can't take the judge off the ballot. So his name, I mean, absentee ballots have already went out, and they would have to, as they say, have a conclave similar to what Ms. Bazile was going to call to get rid of the monster. Hillary Clinton. But again, Judge Moore is not going to voluntarily. He will not resign. And them removing him would be a very nasty fight. And he'll just encourage people to go ahead and vote for him anyway. And then he'll contest the election. So in other words, it'll be a long, drawn-out situation there. And McConnell, the only thing he can say is, well, if the allegations turn out to be factual. The problem is with these kinds of cases, and particularly with a person as controversial as Judge Moore, he's ran in a number of races for the head of the Supreme Court. He's been thrown off the Supreme Court of Alabama. He's returned again. He ran for governor, wasn't successful there. And it's amazing, none of these allegations came out. And people, obviously, if they are correct, knew about them. So it becomes suspicious, and it comes from the Washington Post. The people in Alabama, as far as they're concerned, the Washington Post isn't worth a warm bucket of spit, as John Nance Garner would say. And so that's not going to really influence that group. Now, there are obviously independents there, and there are some Republican types perhaps would stay home. That is where the situation is going, but it's a nasty situation, and we are about a month out, and I think on the Alabama law it's 70-something days. But again, they will start. I'm not sure when they start their early voting. Usually that starts before Election Day, at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks, and absentee ballots have to be back. So if they've been already mailed out, those will be trickling back in, and some of more, as they say, enthusiastic supporters, particularly older people, will vote in that direction. They won't pay much attention to this particular situation, because what happens with some of the people making the allegations, one was 14 at the time. She's, I guess, now in her 30s, maybe, or something like that. Judge Moore is 70, wherever she is. The mother of this young girl is 71. We don't know of any relationships between Justice Moore and this mother. Who knows? But anyway, the whole thing is some others were between her age and 18. If they were 18, forget it. With that situation there, they're going to have to find someone more recent than that. And that perhaps is doubtful. And this whole bandwagon on the Bill Cosby effects come out. Of course, it didn't Harvey Weinstein in, but old Harvey had been in business for 30 years. And he was in Hollywood. Judge Moore is in the woods of Alabama. So will this hurt Judge Moore? Well, we'll see. Next week this time we'll tell you. But the judge is not going to, as they say, resign. And the pressure is on the Democrats. If some, on the Republicans, if they end up losing this seat, the GOP that is, they will have one less seat to work with. It'll get more and more dicey as it goes along. It's sort of like with the approval numbers of DJ Trump. Anyway, let's go to Dr. Sabato. This is by Carl Klondike and Jeffrey Skilling, writing for the Crystal Ball on the 9th of November. We appreciate getting these. Tuesday represented the best non-presidential election night Democrats have had since 2006. 2006, G.W. Bush of Texas was the president. They swept the statewide ticket in Virginia for the second election in a row, and they picked up New Jersey. Two-Ton Christie will be retired next year. They also won a critical majority, making a state Senate election in Washington State. So they won a complete control of state government in 2 states, in New Jersey and in Washington State. We covered that election, incidentally, out in Washington State. Our candidate, Carrie Moon, came up short to the establishment candidate, Durkin. But that is the way sometimes it happens. The big shock to us, this is a crystal ball speaking, and to anyone who is honest about their pre-election expectations, was the Democrats winning what could be a 50-50 tie in the Virginia House of Delegates. Democrats went into the election. Now, this is amazing. At 66 to a 34 deficit in the House. They were expected to win seats. Below double digits seemed to be an absolute max. Instead, they were on track to net 15 more seats with a chance of getting the 50-50 split. And even taking the simple majority, the canvassing is still going on, and a few seats are out there. Democrats generally perform quite well across the country. It's hard to find any silver lining for Republicans, and there's no doubt about that. This is what is more important, this is a psychological victory for Democrats, whom after the malpractice of Hillary the Monster Clinton in 2016, and prior to that, since 2008, 2009 actually, when Barack Obama of Illinois, then senator, took over as president, they were able to use the race card very effectively. That is the whole thing about Obamacare. It is named after Obama, so the Republicans decided with the racist Steve Bannon at the control of the plane. That might be, as they say, the infamous German blimp that went down to Heidelberg. But anyway, and that's a good name for it. Bannon, flying his Heidelberg around, decided that, well, and this is, he inherited this not just from the alt-right characters. This was national policy put out by Old Man McConnell of Kentucky. The Old Man McConnell is responsible for this, no doubt about it, because he said, well, we're going to make Barack Obama a one-term president. Well, Barack Obama was a two-term president. And Old Man McConnell is still there, but Bannon and Judge Moore and the various others have called for him to get the hell out of there. And he's just hanging on by his bootstraps, and many other Republicans as they are running for the woods. Virginia polls were once again collectively off in the election. Northam was about 3 points in the Click Channel average. He won by 9. But this time, instead, Republican candidates outrunning his polling as Ken Cincinnati did in 2013's gubernatorial race, and 2017's nominee Ed Gillespie did in Virginia's 2014 race. The Democrats in Northern beat the numbers, and in fact, the polling averages basically named Gillespie's 45% share of the vote, but underestimated Nahan's a share of the vote by a half dozen of points. And it was a little bit different there towards the breaking Democrats and Republican exit polls. Northam's voters who said they decided in the last weekend, and this is what we here at the Ouija board, we're looking at the same thing. We talked about that when we came in here, that in the last week, about a fifth of the electorate, by 20 points, he had a more modest lead of 7 points among the large universe of early deciders. This was at the point when many thought he was kicking the race away, more than below the political dynamic we got to use during the Barack Obama presidency, polling underestimated Republicans, and that was always the case. And Democrats crashed in off-year elections, showed signs of the reversal Tuesday. That makes sense given that what we know about off-year elections. The White House often suffers, particularly when the Oval Office occupant is unpopular. But that would not necessarily translate into Virginia. But again, Trump did not win Virginia. Hillary the Monster Clinton did. For Democrats, more than fallout for Republicans, while it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, no doubt about that. It's apples to oranges or whatever. Was the biggest third-party vote in 2013. Gillespie got more votes than Cincinnati, 160,000 more, and Northam got 335,000 more than Terry McCullough. That was Bill Clinton's money man. And Phil Murphy outrun the monster in Jersey. She won Jersey by 14 points. Now, that was a presidential situation, whereas as of the writing, Murphy was at 13. Well, that's a little different because that race had been cast for a very long time. Mr. Murphy had run away with Drago by double digits, in turning out about the same number, around 2.1 million on competitive contests there. What was amazing in Jersey, that Tutan Christie was able to win in Jersey. Period. So another character here, Lobando, announced he's in Jersey 2, announced he won't run for re-election. You'll see a lot of Republicans, as they say, take it to the high ground. Virginia House of Delegates were nothing short of extraordinary. Even the most bullish Democrats have been thrilled with low double digits gain at this writing. It's 51 to 49 a split, or a 50 split seem likely. Now, this is amazing when you think about it. They had the state senate. All 40 seats were up. Are up in 2019. Features a slim. Now, this is a slim 21 to 19, a Republican majority. They'll start to see the handwriting on the wall. Period. Additionally, a Republican incumbent holds a 12-vote lead in Clinton won, I don't know, House District 94. So, in other words, the counting is still out there in Virginia. The ever higher effect is there. In Georgia, Democrats also picked up additional 2 races not listed because they won in the first round of the all-party primaries. That was House District 119 and another district there down in Georgia. So there are things that Mr. Alsop did, in fact, get some things done. In Virginia, 60 of the 100 House Delegate seats have both a Democrat and a Republican. 54 of these featured incumbents in the contest there. So let's move on down here. Two-party results in Virginia's 3 statewide offices. Variations in performance. This is from 1969. Now, one of the problems I've always had with these, you have to remember, in 1969, Virginia was still existing on an apartheid atmosphere there. So a totally different kind of situation. If you go back there, the Republicans had 53.6%, Lieutenant Governor 56 point whatever there. We won't really go into those. Virginia's trend to watch out on election. What are some of the changes there? Two-party majority locally there. The gubernatorial comparison to 16 shows a change from 16 to 17. These are graphics. We won't really go into those. But a couple of caveats. The silver lining for Republicans' Tuesday night result is that Gillespie actually improved his own showing in the 2014 Senate challenge to Mark Warner. Now, that is interesting within itself. Joe Meacham, the senator, he's over in West Virginia, the only state that is classified as 100% Appalachia. But this is possible that he and other red state Democrats could fall to Republicans even in a greater democratic environment. No doubt about that. DJ Trump just concluded a $250 billion trade deal in China, and some of that will go to West Virginia. In conclusion, while Democrats wave in the Old Dominion state, elsewhere was bigger than we and many expected. There are key points to remember. The results make sense. Historically, we are noting throughout the year that a party tradition, that in modern times doesn't happen as much as you would think, because usually these off-year elections are low turnout elections. Haven't got the percentage. We'll have to check. They probably haven't got it all out. However, we've been hearing complaints for much of the month from Democrats about Northam's campaign. We think he allowed Gillespie to dictate the terms of the race down the stretch. Gillespie's campaign was more aggressive, and Northam's did make mistakes. For instance, he got totally spun around by the question of sanctuary cities. We remember that one. Gillespie clearly wanted to make this race about social issues, statues, but there was Heather Heyer looking down upon him, and attacks on immigrants fell on the voting rights. Part of the problem there was Virginia, long history there. Latino poster, let's see where we are. Indeed, the poster Latino Decisions argued exactly that on Wednesday, voters were very aware the campaign had been heavily racialized, and this moved away from Gillespie towards Northam, no doubt about it. And whatever their ultimate effect, Gillespie's preferred issues, racially charged ones, to be sure, did dominate the final weeks of the race. The Democrats were worried sick that Northam would lose. Well, there was that possibility Northam would lose because Northam made some mistakes, and then he came out against the sanctuary cities. But ultimately, the followers of O.J. Simpson came to his rescue in great numbers. They turned out there people in northern Virginia and those suburbs, extraburbs, independents, young people. That's how these, and even in red areas, old homophobe himself got defeated by a transgender person. So in other words, new elements came out. People just got sick and tired there. And let me finish this up. There's only so many things a candidate can control in a bad environment, as Democrats learned over and over in the Obama years. Well, the Obama years was a different situation. Race was, as in the Bill Cosby factor, was front and center. But when you get a situation where one of their own in Virginia, a European like Everhire, being murdered by this alt-right Bannon boy, that turns people's stomach soured. Even middle-of-the-road conservative like Larry Sabato, Dr. Sabato, was sickened to his stomach by what happened in Charlottesville. Now, you remember Charlottesville has a historic situation, and this character came to town, disturbed the town, and disturbed everything, the tranquility there, and people did not forget it. Let me move on here. Check our time. All right, we're in pretty good shape here. To this deal that DJ Trump set out at $250 billion. I don't know if we'll have time to get it or not. We'll get it on Numbers Man later. I suppose we'll have to get it there. But anyway, it was $250 billion, an energy company in China. Now moving along, we'll save Jerry Jones and his struggles with the NFL against Roger Goodell later. We'll also get into focus on Mr. Hernandez, who was suffering from a brain injury, severe brain injury in Boston. We'll get that one later. And this Aaron Burke, the nightmare of Bannon, we've already covered. This is from the Washington Post. I have one little item here. The old general there tried to persuade Elaine Duke to deport some Hondurans along with Nicaraguans. Nicaraguans will be leaving soon. There's 150,000 Haitians and 200,000 Salvadorans who are skating probably on full ice. We have 57,000 Hondurans, so the 2,500 have to go now. And that was something that was passed in 1998. So they put pressure on her. She'll be leaving soon, incidentally, also. And the right-hand person of old General Kelly will be, Nielsen will be taking over. So that will be a different situation. It'll be bye-bye. Joe Scarborough, the headline here, we'd spent a lot of time on this. Tuesday's election proved American politics are in a disaster. Well, American politics, disagree, hadn't been any more of a disaster than they've been over the last, since Tricky Dick on and off. The Grand Old Party more or less dominated national politics from Lincoln's election in 1860 until the Great Depression when Franklin Roosevelt took over, but it wasn't the same party. Then the Reagan Revolution in the 80s, and 14 years later, old Newt Leroy Gingrich took over there. Karl Rove in 2004 spoke of a permanent Republican majority. 2 years later, Nancy Pelosi took over as Speaker. And that was the end of that story right there. Trumpism is in full retreat, no doubt about that. The fact that Trump's GOP was so badly beaten by the party of Donna Brazile. Well, they were. And Republican majorities have been undone by McCarthyism. Now, this goes back to McCarthyism, effectively what you have now. So, in other words, the Republicans, since the 50s, and of course, Ike got caught up in that by this drug addict from Wisconsin named Joe McCarthy. But Joe McCarthy left in disgrace, and he died. He was a heroin addict. So that was the end of old Joe McCarthy. But it reared its ugly head up. And this is part of the problem there, that even Harry S. Truman was rebuffed by the right-wing tendencies of the American people. Because if you remember, on FDR had fended off a depression, and in the war years, people were much better off. There was plenty of work because of the war economy. And the man out of Kansas City, or actually out of Independence, but Kansas City, Harry S. Truman, the S standing for nothing, won an election where the newspapers had said Dewey had won that election and not Harry S. Truman. But Harry S. Truman went on to integrate the armed forces. He went on to pass some legislation. He was not able to pass national health care. That went to a man from Illinois, a former senator named Barack Obama. But he did manage to do it. So the Republican Party has been up, they have been down, they've been in Watergate, and people try to return them. And let me finish up Joe Scarsborough here. If Tuesday's elections begin, a long process of removing the president from office, that is not really. This is where a lot of people get confused. DJ Trump is not necessarily the problem. We covered, incidentally, you can find this on many of our outlets on Spreaker, the visit of DJ Trump to China, the state visit there of President Trump. And it is on there, and it is, you can find it up on Facebook and various other places that it is there. It's not on iHeart yet because we did it on a BR on the World, that's our International Affairs program, which has not made it there yet. But if we have time, we'll link it where you can go and find it on Spreaker. So that is part of what's going on, finishing up this long process. The only way to escape the cycle is to break apart the hyper-partisan two-party duopoly that keeps Washington too divided, too dysfunctional, and too directional for too long. Well, Joe Scarsborough, being a Republican, knows better than that because he had to get the polarization in there for the Republicans to deliver to Wall Street, to banks, their quote-unquote share. I won't say fair share because it's not, but that is a political necessity of capitalism. You have to look at it from the necessity of capitalism, what went on there, and this whole escapade in China is to pick up more markets, as Mark said. He's still there. And also at the same time, you have in the U.S. the retail racket falling down, and lately the tech companies fell down a bit too also. We'll have that on Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomics program. We also have an open source report where we'll be talking about some security. Let's go now to ESPN and get the sports for the night. We will be coming shortly here with All About Sports, our new sports program, which is about the business of sports. We'll get that a little later here. There'll be a lot of college games, incidentally, coming up. Oh, boy. Sherman out for season, ruptured Achilles. So, boy. Anyway, one of the things that happens here many times. So let's see if we can get this going here. And this is NFL. Anyway, we are boycotting them. On to the NBA. Seattle won the game, I can tell you that, over Arizona. Arizona Cardinals. Anyway, there's nothing, as they say, in stone. But nonetheless, the Lakers were at the Wizards in Washington, 111-95. The Wizards over the Lakers of Los Angeles. The Pelicans and Raptors in Toronto, 122-118. Raptors. The Cavaliers were in Houston. Houston 117-113. The 76ers were at the Kings out in California, 103-108. Doesn't get any closer than that. And finally, the Thunder and Nuggets in Denver. Nuggets 102-94. Tomorrow on the week that was, tomorrow morning, we'll have the, at least we'll have some, I think, of the college football scores, excuse me, not college basketball scores. Yeah, they're all, well, wait a minute here. Yeah, later today we'll have Washington, Stanford, and then everything else is Saturday. We have Michigan State, Ohio State, Rutgers, Penn State, etc. Noon games. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was, and the Monday morning quarterback on a Monday morning, and we'll try to link some of the programs, at least the state visit by DJ Trump to China. Now, DJ is now in Vietnam, and he'll be at the Asian Pacific Conference there. We'll cover that also, and hopefully soon we'll get those things up on iHeart. We're over on Spreaker, and we're on Stitcher, incidentally, so hopefully we'll get all of that straight. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on a Saturday morning from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. We're on the 10th of November, 2017.